Now to South Africa, where President Ramaphosa is holding emergency meetings to address the country's deepening energy crisis. Authorities have been imposing rolling blackouts as the country's embattled power utility struggles to meet demand. And the power cuts are hitting the economy. DW's Christine Mundwa reports from Johannesburg.
This generator is keeping Thando Magubu's business running, but the backup power solution is not a cheap one, and it's costing a whole lot more to continue serving the local summer favorite in Soweto.
We are fortunate that we have invested in a generator, but the costs of running Soweto Creamery have grown because we need to purchase petrol on a regular basis.
The past few weeks has seen some of the worst power cuts on record in South Africa, with the power utility Eskom rolling out nationwide blackouts, locally referred to as load shedding, for up to as much as 10 hours a day. Even hospitals have not been spared.
It does affect a lot of our equipment that we do have on site. For example, like I have mentioned, we have our elevators that are obviously put onto the generators, which keep going on and off, which have also put patients in very dangerous situations by being inside there and not being able to get out.
In a country that already has high levels of crime, the power outages are further compromising safety and security in some areas.
People are scared to even use the roads at night. That it's so pitch black. It's at the intersection right behind me, being one of the hot spots. People are getting robbed, getting mugged, cars are being stolen at gunpoint. So those are the issues that we face during load shedding, especially when it's pitch black at night.
South Africa's coal power stations supply most of the country's electricity. But these power stations are not functioning at full capacity.
South Africa uses on average about 27,000 megawatts. At the moment, we're struggling to produce 21. And in an electricity system, you've got to match supply and demand instantaneously exactly. The reason we have load shedding or load reduction in South Africa is that it's to prevent the grid from collapsing.
While the power outages are a necessary evil, public outrage is growing.
What really riles people up here is that much of the country's electricity problems have been attributed to endemic corruption at the state-owned power utility and a slowness by the authorities to invest in new sources of energy, especially as the country's coal power plants are very old, they break down easily and often have to go for maintenance that puts them out of commission.
As the electricity crisis further deteriorated, the managers of the power utility held emergency meetings with the country's president and other stakeholders. But South Africans have been warned there is no quick fix and that the outages will continue for at least another year.
Let's get more on this from energy analyst Clyde Mallinson, who we saw in Christine's report. He joins us from South Africa. He joins us from Johannesburg, beg your pardon. Welcome to DW. South Africans have been putting up with these power cuts for years. Last year, though, was the worst on record with 205 days. Just explain to us how it got so bad.
It's in the very simplest terms, we haven't put enough new capacity in place to cover for the declining output of the coal fleet. So the coal fleet has been getting older and it hasn't been declining linearly. It's starting to decline exponentially. And there's a mismatch between what we've put in as new generation with the rate at which the old coal fleet is now declining. And the bits that are working are all having to pick up extra load. And we all know if you put extra load on fewer pieces of equipment, they're more likely to break. And that's basically the position we've got ourselves into.
And what part has corruption played in this?
It's one of the elements. It's one of the elements. But I would say the biggest problem has been policy deadlock. There's been a hiatus of about 7 years, I think, that the replacement of new generation has stalled and we haven't done it. And that's been the biggest problem. And then if you add on to that corruption and other things, it obviously doesn't help.
So they knew that this was coming because it's predictable. You have equipment, it gets old, you have to replace it. So what is the policy deadlocked over? We have to replace these power plants. Let's replace these power plants. One seems to follow the other, but you say there is a deadlock. Over what?
Yeah, I think just in terms of the fleet, I think the decline of the fleet has caught out the policymakers and perhaps even Eskom itself. So there's that old saying that how did you go bankrupt? Slowly at first and then very rapidly. And so it's been one of the things I saw was that you're going to get a big shock when you go to your cardiologist one day and he explains to you that you didn't look after your heart properly and now it's breaking. And we're kind of in that phase, and there hasn't been the urgency to get a crack on really with putting new generation in place.
So there's a special meeting convened by the President today to address this crisis. What do you expect to come out of it?
Look, there's been any number of meetings. So there's been cabinet meetings with his cabinet ministers. The meeting at the moment is with the Parliamentary Crisis Committee, I think they call them, and that broadens the scope of people who attend. So it's not just cabinet ministers, it's premiers of the provinces. There'll be various advisors. But at this stage, it's really frustrating because many of us have been calling and predicting this crisis for some time, and the message that we've had is do something with a degree of urgency before the crisis becomes a disaster. And I'm afraid we're in disaster territory at the moment. And it needs almost a warlike effort to pull us out of this. Become a logistics.
Thank you for explaining that so clearly, energy analyst Clyde Mallinson.